Well, with the release of X-Men Days of Future Past, literally right around the corner, I felt this was as good a time as any to talk about the long-running X-Men film franchise. Now, ordinarily, I might be talking about the Godzilla movies instead because Godzilla is also right around the corner, except there are more Godzilla movies than there are Bond movies. There are a lot of them, and I just don't think that I would be willing to, or I don't think that I would be able to talk about all of them, or at least any number of them, in 3 days, or 3 or 4 days, because Godzilla comes out this Friday, and I am excited, and I have been a long-time Godzilla fan. But I've also been a long-time X-Men fan, and X-Men, there are only 6 or 7, so I have much more confidence that I can get this done before Days of Future Past comes out than I can get Godzilla done. So, really, more than any other comic book movie, we have Bryan Singer's 2000 film X-Men to thank for the modern comic book movie renaissance, as it were. Because you had things like Blade in the 90s, but films like those weren't all that comic booky. I mean even earlier than that, you had Richard Donner's Superman or Tim Burton's Batman, showing that yeah, you can tell dramatic stories with comic book characters. But really, it wasn't until X-Men that we really got this trend going of hard hitting comic book blockbusters, um, basically coming in succession, one after the other, and honestly, Richard Donner's Superman and Tim Burton's Batman, you were taking two of the most popular comic book characters of all time and adapting them to the screen, whereas X-Men paved the way for lesser known comic book heroes like Iron Man, Captain America, the Hulk, to eventually get their own movies, and to eventually get good movies where actual big name filmmakers were putting real efforts into telling these really adult stories with material that for the longest time was ruled as, oh, just being for kids. It's just a silly comic book. And that's what I really love about Bryan Singer's X-Men movies, is that they take this material so seriously. They treat it like it's real. I mean, if X-Men got the comic book movie boom started, then it's actually one of the movies that actually got me interested in comic books or comic book characters in general. I love the Bryan Singer X-Men movies. I mean, this series of movies was one of the things that I grew up with. So, even taking nostalgia aside, is the movie any good? Does it hold up nowadays? Because it is 14 years old at this point. Jeez, 14 years old. Honestly, I think so. I mean, yeah, there are obviously some elements of it that you could rule out as being too silly or out there or downright outdated in today's day and age. But for the most part, I think it still manages to be a pretty solid film, a pretty solid start to a series that I'm still surprised hasn't been rebooted at this point. I mean, yeah, First Class kind of it kind of jump started the franchise in being a very good prequel and not really including any of the previous actors or any of the previous styles of filmmaking. But it was a prequel. It was still in continuity with the rest of the series, although there were some holes in said continuity. Anyway, the story of the first X-Men movie, the first time around, is is we live in a world where mutants exist. Apparently there is a recessive gene in numerous people that is going around that is referred to as the X gene. And basically, what happens is that this gene basically gives one access to these very superhuman powers, like being able to shoot optic blasts from your eyes, being able to rapidly heal, being able to absorb people's life force and memories simply by touching them, being able to walk through walls, etc. Now, there are some people, like Professor Charles Xavier, who feel that this new breed of species is not only the next stage in evolution for man, but also that this more advanced species should seek to live in harmony with the Homo sapien, who might actually get pushed off of its pedestal of dominance. However, on the extreme other end of the spectrum, there are people like Eric Lenscher, or Magneto as he goes by, who feel that this new species of human should be referred to as Homo superior, and should dominate over its lesser Homo sapien brother. He feels that mutants should be hailed as superior, and instead of being met with fear like they commonly are, mutants should be held basically as royalty, and it's the Homo sapiens who should be exiled and ostracized. So you have two arguments here, and at the center of it are two central characters who come together as runaways. There's Logan, aka Wolverine, someone with the power to heal rapidly, and who has these unbreakable metal claws that come out of his knuckles. And you also have Rogue, who, like I said before, absorbs people's life force, memories, and in the case of mutants, their powers for a short time, simply by touching them. So she can't physically touch a human being without causing some damage and almost killing them. So these two misfits, as it were, come together, and they are basically being pulled every which way by Charles Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, basically a school that he has put together, where not only does he educate these ostracized mutants in regular education, but he also shows them a way to not only use their powers responsibly, but to later assimilate back into society as one with society, as just another member of society, rather than a superior member. But also, this school serves as the base for a team of superheroes, a team of X-Men, as it were, who basically fight against anyone who would A, persecute the mutants, wrongfully persecute the mutants, and B, anyone who would seek to harm the humans. And then there's Magneto's Brotherhood of Mutants, where it's a significantly smaller force who basically share his belief that humans, that Homo sapiens should seek to emulate mutants and should accept their place beneath Homo superior instead of subjugating and exiling them. So already you have a really good setup, albeit pretty chaotic. And that's really one of the biggest problems with this movie, is that there are so many characters and so much to swallow, because there's Wolverine, there's Rogue, there's the X-Men, which consist of Jean Grey, Cyclops, Storm. There's Professor X, There's Magneto. There's Senator Kelly, a anti-mutant activist. There is Magneto's team, who mostly are devoid of personality. And there are all these... Well, I don't want to say the storyline is chaotic, but really the biggest problem is there are a lot of characters. And you really don't get to know some of them as much as you might like. However, one benefit that this movie definitely does have is its cast. Oh my god. You have Patrick Stewart as Professor X. Perfect. You have Ian McKellen as Magneto. Perfect. You have Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. Probably one of the most unexpected choices. The most unexpectedly brilliant choices that this movie boasts. Because Hugh Jackman, at first glance, does not fit the bill of Wolverine. Wolverine is a short, hairy guy who will basically kill or beat up anyone who gets in his way. Hugh Jackman was not really a big-name actor at the time. He's an Australian Broadway dancer and singer, and he's over 6 feet tall. So yeah, there were assuredly many people who were going, "What? Really?" But again, he turned out to be perfect for the role. He made this role his own. He makes it feel so natural, and makes it feel so organic, and he lends so much charisma to this character that honestly, I can't imagine anyone else playing him. At least not at this point. Not after 14 years of the same guy. Man, already you have three very fantastic leads. Then you have the excellent supporting cast. Anna Paquin as Rogue. Post the piano, but pre-True Blood. Kind of that awkward period in between. You have James Marsden as Cyclops. You have Famke Janssen as Storm. Or no, not Storm, Jean Grey. You have Halle Berry as Storm. You have Bruce Davison as Senator Kelly. Pretty good cast, honestly. Very good ensemble. And that's one of the things that really benefits this movie, is the ensemble. All of these guys are very talented, and they lend dramatic weight to what would ordinarily be considered silly material, at least in the day and age in which this was made. I mean, this came 3 years after Batman and Robin. And Batman and Robin, we all know how that turned out. And yeah, that had A-list actors too, like George Clooney and Michael Gough. But the thing is, the actors here are taking this material very seriously. This is not campy in the least. I mean, yeah, there is humor here, and the humor does work. But again, they're not winking at the camera saying, "Yeah, we're in a comic book movie." No, they treat this with such maturity. And yeah, it's not the type of maturity that you might find in, I'm trying to think of an example, in, say, a Hitchcock movie or a Kubrick movie. It's not the type of high-class entertainment like that. It is a popcorn movie, but it's a popcorn movie with some brains. It's a popcorn movie with actually something to say. The social commentary in this, probably not as prominent as it should have been, is still there, and it's really what makes this movie relevant in modern times. I mean, yeah, I'm not saying that there's nearly as much prejudice going around in modern times as there was previously, but to me, this handles the message of prejudice much better than Avatar. Because Avatar, it just hammered it in, and it was basically very black and white. With these X-Men movies, there are a lot more gray areas in terms of morality and in terms of who is prejudiced against who. Because yeah, there is a scene there is a very subtle scene between Storm and Senator Kelly, who, where he asks, "Do you hate humans?" And she's like, "Sometimes." So it's not all, "Oh, leave these mutants alone." There are mutants who, yeah, you could argue that they have a reason to hate humans because of the prejudice, but you have mutants who hate humans. You have mutants like Magneto who hate humans, who want to see them wiped off the face of the earth if they do not submit to mutant superiority. So you have these complex messages, again, probably not as prominent as they could have been, but it's, considering what a milestone this was in comic book entertainment, in comic book movie entertainment, you let it slide. I mean, I think I can give this movie the benefit of the doubt. This is not... I can appreciate the fact that there probably was some influence over this movie. There probably was some semblance of trouble, or not trouble, but turbulence in getting this movie to the big screen. I know for a fact that Spider-Man, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, was stuck in development hell for several years. But I'll get into that another time. The point is, X-Men, I think, works. Yeah, it's a little too chaotic at times, and the story, when you actually learn what Magneto's plan is, can probably be made fun of. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And some of the effects haven't aged too well. Some of the CGI with the character of Mystique. By the way, Rebecca Romijn as Mystique. I really like Rebecca Romijn as Mystique. She's mysterious. There is an element of Mystique about her. So yeah, overall, I like this movie. The cast does a good job. All of them. I mean, like I said, the three leads are fantastic, and the supporting cast, even though they're not really given a whole lot to do, in the grand scheme of things, do carry the movie relatively well. Like I said, you don't really get to know Cyclops, or you don't really get to know Storm in the way that you get to know Wolverine and Rogue and Xavier and Magneto. But overall, yeah, I like this. If I had one gripe, it's that they could have made the villains more interesting. I mean, really, the only two villains with any semblance of personality are Magneto and maybe Mystique. And even then, this might be the misinformation effect going around in my head, because I might be associating the Mystique in the first movie with the Mystique in the second movie. But even so, Mystique, I think they get enough across with her to, I mean, whether it be her fight with Wolverine, whether it be when she beats up Senator Kelly, I think they get enough across with her to, yeah, where you get a clear picture of what her motives are, of what she's about, what her personality is. I mean, but when it comes to Toad and Sabretooth, they're just reduced to henchmen. And I didn't really expect them to do much with Toad, but you have Sabretooth, the long-standing rival of Wolverine. And this movie would have us believe that, as far as Logan can remember, this is the first time that they have met. This is the first time that they are squaring off. So already, in terms of backstory, you have completely robbed this movie of this long-standing, interesting relationship between these two guys who hate each other's guts. I mean, there is more to the Wolverine-Sabretooth relationship than "I don't like you, I'm going to fight you now." And I think having them be familiar with each other beforehand would have made the climax more interesting than we have to go up there and stop the bad guy and we have to get through all these henchmen first. And that's really where I think the final act falls apart. Is that, well, I don't want to say falls apart, but I don't think it's as strong as the first half of this movie. The second half of this movie is like, come on, we gotta catch Magneto, and it's not really handled with as much meticulous care and clever setup as the first half of the movie. But with that said, even though the relationship between Wolverine and Sabretooth is not really there, and even though a more personal conflict for Wolverine would have been appreciated in the final act, where it should have been, instead of, oh, you're the guy who knocked me out at the beginning of the movie, I have to fight you now. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more between those two characters in that, honestly, and I think it was a real missed opportunity, because you have Wolverine and the Sabretooth in the same movie, and they're squaring off for the first time. There's no rivalry there. Sabretooth barely says a word. And I'm not saying it's some Shakespearean relationship, but some acknowledgement would have been nice. I don't know. Despite those complaints, some of the relationships don't really get to develop, Wolverine and Sabretooth included. And some of the characters are kind of sidelines and marginalized. Like the relationship between Scott and Jean could have had more time devoted to it, blah, 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 blah. And like I said, the bad guys, Magneto is really the only one with any kind of depth. But overall, it's a fairly solid start to a long-running franchise, and it really gets by on just how seriously they treat this material. And there are some loyalists out there who are complaining, why didn't they have the colorful costumes, blah blah blah. Why didn't Wolverine have the cowl on? I don't know why you're complaining. He had the hair. And Ultimate Wolverine doesn't have the cowl. I don't know, I'm just nerding out at this point. But yeah, the acting is very solid. The setup to this world is handled just subtly enough, while at the same time giving you exactly what you want to see, which is these characters really demonstrating what they're capable of. I really like this universe, and I really like these scenarios. I really like the social commentary that goes on in these X-Men stories, and yeah, it was a milestone, and to me anyways, it still holds up nowadays. So yeah, definitely looking forward to Days of Future Past, and this was a very welcome revisiting of the not only the first film in this series, but one of the first movies in the modern comic book movie boom. So that was definitely refreshing.